I owe a goldfish an apology. Now, I realize that's a very strange way to start a podcast episode, but just stick with me. So, a while back, I confidently told people that humans now have shorter attention spans than goldfish. You know the statistic 8 seconds. Goldfish gets 9. We humans lose to a fish. Classic us. And I didn't just mention it once. Oh no, I repeated it at work, at dinner, probably to strangers, with my whole chest, like I had personally interviewed the fish. The problem is, I went back to fact check myself, and that statistic is complete bullshit. No, seriously, it's fake, which would just be embarrassing if it wasn't also the funniest possible way to begin today's episode. Because I set out to answer one question: are we getting dumber? And the very first piece of evidence I grabbed turned out to be completely wrong. Which raises a much better question. If that isn't true, then what actually is? Hey, and welcome to, or welcome back to, the Average Joe Nerdcast. I'm Nate, your resident Average Joe, occasional rabbit hole archaeologist, recovering victim of fake internet statistics, and apparently a man who owes an innocent goldfish a formal apology. Now, if you listen to the very first Are We Getting Dumber episode, first of all, thank you. Second, I owe you a correction. Not because someone yelled at me in the comments, and not because someone tried to gotcha me. Because one of the things I've always wanted this show to be is curious, not certain, because certainty is easy. But curiosity, well, it takes work. And somewhere between researching this episode, reading academic papers, and slowly realizing I had accidentally slandered an entire species of fish, I found something. Actually, I found a lot of things. Some of them were reassuring. Some of them were deeply concerning. And some of them made me laugh so hard I had to turn my phone off and go touch grass for a minute. Because today's episode isn't really about goldfish. It's about us, about how we learn, how we think, and how we decide what's true, and whether we've accidentally started outsourcing some of the very things that make us. Us. So, let's go see where this rabbit hole leads. So, that wasn't exactly on my 2026 bingo card. Seriously, out of everything I expected to find while researching this episode, I did not expect the first thing I grabbed to completely explode in my hands, because, to tell you the truth, I liked that statistic. It was simple, it was funny, it made for a great conversation starter. You could throw it out at work, or at dinner, or on Facebook. Hey, did you know humans now have shorter attention spans than goldfish? Boom! Everyone nods. Everyone laughs. Everyone immediately moves on to looking at their phones. Which, in hindsight, probably helped the statistic. The thing is, I never questioned it. Not once. Because it sounded right. It felt right. And if I'm being completely honest, it confirmed something I already believed, which, as it turns out, is exactly when your brain should be screaming, "Hey buddy, maybe check those receipts." Mine, well, it just didn't. Mine was apparently on a lunch break. So I started digging. Not because I cared about the fish, although justice for Gerald. We'll get there. Trust me. but because I wanted to know where this thing actually came from. Just think about it. Somewhere at some point, someone had to be the very first person to look at a goldfish and think, you know what? Let's compare this little dude to humanity. How do you even run that experiment? Is there some random dude in a lab coat standing next to an aquarium with a clipboard? All right, Gerald, eyes on me, buddy. Come on, we're going to do some focus exercises today. Excellent work, Gerald! Outstanding concentration. Honestly, better than Dave in accounting. What are we doing? So, I started following the trail. Turns out the version almost all of us have heard traces back to a Microsoft Canada marketing report from 2015. Okay, that's promising. Surely Microsoft has a source. So I go looking. Turns out their report points to another company called Statistic Brain. Cool. So now I'm thinking, perfect. That's where the study is. Except it isn't. Statistic Brain couldn't produce a credible source for the number either. So now I'm confused. So I keep digging. And eventually I stumble onto an investigation by the BBC. And at this point, I'm rooting for the fish. Please, someone, anyone, show me where this number came from. Nothing. Not Microsoft, not Statistic Brain, not even the BBC. Because as far as anyone can tell, there never was a study showing humans have shorter attention spans than goldfish. We all just accepted it. And I swear to you, I actually sat back in my chair and just stared at the ceiling for a minute. Because I'd repeated that statistic more than once, full of confidence to actual human beings. With my whole chest, like I had interviewed the fish. And then the whole episode changed because I realized something. The reason that story spread is because no one checked it, because it sounded true, because it fit the story we were already telling ourselves, because it confirmed what we already believed. We are the goldfish story. And I know that's uncomfortable. Believe me, I'm standing right there with you. I'm not making fun of people from the outside. I'm admitting I was one of them. I believed it, I repeated it, I helped spread it. I don't think misinformation survives because people are stupid. I think misinformation survives because human beings, myself included, are spectacularly bad at fact-checking things we already agree with. And that's a much harder lesson because now I don't get to point at those people. Now I've got to point at me, which created a problem because now I didn't know what I knew anymore. So I had two options. I could shut off my computer, turn off my phone, pretend none of this happened. Go watch raccoons wash grapes for 3 more hours, which, by the way, still a phenomenal use of an afternoon. Or I could keep digging. I chose poorly. Because the next thing I found was a guy named James Flynn. And my friends, that man accidentally kicked off one of the biggest scientific arguments of the last 40 years. Now, anytime someone gets an entire scientific phenomenon named after them, I immediately become interested. That's just not normal. That's like scientists discovering the Steve effect. Producer Steve would become absolutely unbearable. He'd introduce himself everywhere like, "Hi, I'm Producer Steve." No relation. So, who was James Flynn? He was a political philosopher and intelligence researcher who started looking at IQ test data from developed countries over decades. Not one classroom, not one school district, not one state. decades, across entire countries. He wasn't trying to prove some grand theory, he was just looking for patterns. And then he found one that absolutely no one was expecting. For most of the 20th century, people kept getting better at certain kinds of cognitive tests. Not once, not twice, but consistently, generation after generation after generation, about 3 IQ points every single decade. Now, before anyone hears IQ and immediately starts writing me a very angry email, please take a breath. IQ is not a measure of your value as a human being. It doesn't measure kindness. It doesn't measure creativity. It doesn't measure whether you'd stop and help someone stranded on the side of the road. It just measures specific cognitive abilities. Things like abstract reasoning, pattern recognition, certain types of problem solving. That's important because the internet hears IQ and immediately goes, "Oh, so you're saying?" No, I'm saying exactly what the researchers said. Nothing more, nothing less. Scientists are actually kind of annoying in the best possible way. They spend years trying to make sure they don't overstate what they know. Meanwhile, the internet sees one headline and immediately declares civilization over. So imagine humanity is a football team. Every single season, we're getting better. Better nutrition, better education, better healthcare, better living conditions. Everything is trending in the right direction. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Human Intelligence Championship. 1930s, we're winning. The 40s, still winning. The 50s, dynasty. The 60s, absolutely cooking. The 70s, someone get these people a sponsorship. The 80s, we are unstoppable. And then the 90s. You know what? I'm going to be honest. I really don't like where this is going because researchers start noticing something. The scores stop climbing. And then, in some countries, they start going backwards. I'm sorry, I wasn't aware that was an option. Countries like Norway, Denmark, Finland, the United Kingdom, France, the Netherlands, Australia, eventually, researchers begin seeing similar trends here in the US. They start calling it the reverse Flynn effect, which honestly sounds less like a scientific phenomenon and more like a direct-to-video superhero movie. But here's the part that really got me. The researchers themselves weren't saying, "People are getting stupid." They were saying something much more careful. Certain cognitive skills, especially abstract reasoning, were not improving the way they had for almost a century. In some places, they were declining. Those are two completely different statements, and that distinction absolutely matters because if we're asking the wrong question, then we're almost guaranteed to end up with the wrong answer. So naturally, I keep reading because now I've got a mystery on my hands. Not an answer, but a mystery. Researchers start throwing out suspects. Education, nutrition, environmental factors, technology, changes in how we process information. Screen time. No one can agree on one cause. No one can point to one smoking gun. I've basically wandered into an academic murder mystery. Every single suspect has a motive, but no one has confessed. Now, did I notice something interesting? Sure. The internet starts becoming part of everyday life around the same time these trends begin changing. Screens start multiplying, the way we consume information changes, the way we communicate changes. Hell, life changes. Is that the reason? I don't know. The researchers themselves do not know. And if someone tells you they know for certain, they're probably trying to sell you a book, or a podcast, or a very expensive online course. Correlation, my friends, it is not causation. Which is deeply inconvenient because it would have made this episode a whole lot easier. But now I've got something I didn't have before. I've got a legitimate scientific mystery on my hands. And once I realized that, I started asking a different question. If researchers are seeing these changes in cognitive testing, are they showing up anywhere else? Because if they are, this rabbit hole just got a hell of a lot deeper. Today's episode of the Average Joe Nerdcast is brought to you by Fact Check. Have you ever confidently repeated something that sounded true, felt true, confirmed everything you already believed, and then discovered it was complete nonsense? Well, then congratulations! You're qualified to be a human being. Introducing Fact Check, the revolutionary new habit that's sweeping absolutely dozens of people. Simply ask one tiny question before hitting share. Where did this actually come from? Amazing! It's like magic! Fact Check may help reduce common symptoms, including reading only the headline. I saw it on Facebook. A guy on TikTok said, "Trust me, bro," accidentally slandering innocent goldfish. Fact Check also encourages revolutionary behavior like changing your mind, saying, I don't know, admitting, hey, I was wrong, and asking, do you have a source for that? Side effects may include slight embarrassment, healthier conversations, fewer Thanksgiving arguments, and the sudden realization that you've been confidently quoting a marketing report from 2015 for the last decade. Don't worry, so was Nate. You're in good company. Fact check, because being wrong isn't the problem, but staying wrong is. Fact Check is not responsible for awkward moments with coworkers after you've spent 6 years telling them goldfish are smarter than they are. Justice for Gerald. So, at this point, I'm actually feeling a little better. Seriously, because maybe IQ tests are just kind of weird. Maybe they're measuring something really specific. Maybe this whole thing ends with, hey, false alarm, everybody. I'd love that. I don't want this episode to be true. I don't get bonus points if humanity is secretly falling apart. Trust me, I'd much rather get on here and tell you I wasted 3 weeks reading academic papers over absolutely nothing. That would have been a fantastic ending. So naturally, I went looking for another receipt, because if this thing is real, it should show up somewhere besides IQ tests. And that's when I found something called the nation's report card. Now, I'm not gonna lie, that sounds incredibly threatening. Imagine someone knocks on your front door. Good afternoon. We've graded the country. Absolutely not. Turns out it's the nickname for the National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP. Basically, it's one of the longest running ways we've measured how American students are doing in reading and math. And it's been around for decades. Perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking for, because now one of two things is about to happen. Either this completely blows the Flynn Effect out of the water, or this rabbit hole gets a hell of a lot deeper. Spoiler alert! I would have preferred option 1, because after the 2022 assessment, Peggy Carr, the commissioner of the National Center for Education Statistics, came out and said something that made me physically stop scrolling. She said, and I quote, "These are some of the largest declines we have observed in a single assessment cycle in 50 years. 50 years! Not 5, not 10, 50! Well, that's concerning. So I keep reading. 4th grade reading scores had dropped back to levels we hadn't seen since the early 90s. Now, I was around in the early 90s. I remember Cartoon Network signing off at night. I remember when your internet made noises before it worked. I remember reading the instruction manual on the ride home because updates were not a thing. Apparently, our reading scores decided to go back with me. We have accidentally time traveled. Now, before someone yells, COVID! Yes, obviously, COVID happened. Every single one of us lived through it. Remote learning, my friends, was fucking brutal. Teachers got thrown into an impossible situation. Us parents got thrown into an impossible situation. Hell, our kids got thrown into an impossible situation. Of course, that hurt learning. It would have been shocking if it hadn't. But here's what kept bothering me. The more I dug, the more I realized the trend had already started before the pandemic. COVID did not create the slide. Hell, it poured gasoline on it, which somehow is even less comforting. And then I found the statistic that honestly hit me harder than everything we'd talked about up to this point. Only 14% of 13-year-olds say they read for fun almost every day. Just 14%. That's the lowest it's ever been recorded. And man, that one stuck with me. Not because I think every kid needs to become a bookworm. That's not the point. The point is, I don't think reading was ever just about reading. You see, when I was growing up, I wasn't reading Halo novels because someone assigned them. I was reading because I had to know what happened to Chief before combat evolved. I wasn't reading Star Wars encyclopedias because there was gonna be a test. I just wanted to know who everyone was. I wanted more. I remember sitting in the back seat after my mom bought me a brand new video game and just reading the manual cover to cover before we ever got home. You younger folks got robbed, by the way. Those manuals, they were fucking awesome. Half the excitement was flipping through the artwork, reading the lore, and learning the controls. Just imagining what you were about to play. The game hadn't even started yet, and your imagination already had. Looking back, I don't think books were secretly teaching me facts. I think they were teaching me how to stay. How to stay with one idea, stay with one story, stay with one problem long enough for it to become mine. Books asked something of me. They ask for patience, for attention. They ask me to do half the work because the author gives you the words and your brain builds the world. Movies don't do that. Hell, TikTok doesn't do that. And Instagram definitely doesn't do that. Books hand you the blueprint, and you build the house. And I wonder if that's one of the things we're quietly practicing less, not reading, but attention. Because books don't just ask you to look, they ask you to stay. And staying is becoming one hell of a rare skill. Producer Steve actually asked me something while I was researching this episode. He goes, So, audiobooks don't count? Steve, buddy, of course they count. This isn't about paper. It's not about ink. It's not about pretending you're better than everyone because you own a leather-bound copy of Moby Dick. It's about attention. That's the muscle I'm worried about because now I've got 3 receipts sitting in front of me. The goldfish story taught me how easily we believe something that feels true. The Flynn Effect showed me researchers have been noticing changes for decades. And the nation's report card showed me those changes might actually be showing up in the real world. And no matter which study I looked at, I kept coming back to the same word: practice. Because every single thing we've talked about so far, reading, reasoning, problem solving, focus, all of it requires reps. You don't get better at any of those things by not doing them. And that's when I realized there was one giant robot-shaped elephant standing in the room: AI. And whether we like it or not, my friends, it's time we talk about it. So here's where I get nervous. Because up until this point, I've been talking about fish, researchers, reading scores, books, things that most reasonable people can have a conversation about. Then I hit the two letters that immediately make everyone lose their minds: AI. Seriously, you can't even say those letters out loud anymore without people deciding what you're about to say before you've even said it. Half the room goes, "It's going to solve everything," while the other half goes, "It's the end of humanity." And somewhere in the middle, the rest of us are just trying to figure out why our phone keeps putting a sparkle emoji next to everything. So before anyone decides where I stand, let me save you the trouble. No, this is not an anti AI episode. Hell, it isn't even a pro AI episode either. It's an anti autopilot episode because here's the reality: the bottle is open, the genie is out. The horse, it has left the barn. The toothpaste, hell, I still don't know where the toothpaste went. The point is, AI is not coming, it is here. Businesses use it, schools use it, doctors use it, engineers use it, artists, they use it too. I use it. Hell, this episode exists because I use it. Not to tell me what I think, but to help me figure out what I think. And that's a really important distinction. Sometimes I will literally sit there and ask it, "Okay, here's the info. Tell me why I'm wrong." Because I don't want an echo chamber. Hell, I can build one of those all by myself. I want friction. I want someone or something to push back, to make me defend an idea, to make me realize I missed something. Because that's where growth lives. Not agreement, friction. Then I started reading studies about students using AI, and honestly, the results made perfect sense. Students using AI often performed better on homework, but when it came time to actually demonstrate what they'd learned, those improvements didn't always follow them because the homework got finished, but the learning didn't necessarily happen. And before anyone starts feeling smug, let me be the first to confess, 16-year-old Nate would have abused the hell out of this thing. Are you kidding me? If you had handed teenage me a chatbot while I was trying to unlock the Hayabusa armor in Halo 3, I'd have thought humanity had peaked. I'd have turned in an essay about a book I did not read, while using Spark Notes for the chapter I also didn't read, and somehow convinced myself I was beating the system. Turns out, the system would have been me. Because the more I sat with all of this, the more one question kept bouncing around in my head. What exactly are we losing? Because AI isn't reaching into your skull and deleting intelligence. It's doing something much quieter than that. It's removing repetition. Just think about the gym. If I pay someone to go lift weights for me, I don't get stronger. I just end up with a very fit employee. The work, it happened, but the growth didn't. And I started wondering, maybe thinking works exactly the same way. I don't become a better writer because something else wrote a beautiful paragraph. I become a better writer by wrestling with the ugly ones, the ones that don't always work, the ones that I rewrite 6 times, the ones that I read out loud and immediately go, "Nope, that's shit." That's where the growth is. I don't become a better problem solver because someone handed me the answer. I become one by sitting in that uncomfortable silence where I don't know the answer yet. That's the workout. And I think somewhere along the way, we accidentally started treating the workout like the obstacle. Maybe the struggle was never getting in the way of learning. Maybe the struggle was the learning. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying don't use AI. I'm just saying be intentional. Use it to challenge your thinking, not replace it. Use it to brainstorm. Use it to assist in learning. Use it to pressure test your ideas. Use it to help you ask much better questions. Just don't hand it the part of the process that was making you stronger, because that's before we even get into the other side of the conversation. The electricity, the water, the data centers, the environmental cost of building giant machine brains that never really sleep. Those are very real concerns, very serious concerns. And honestly, they deserve an entire episode all their own because that's a completely different rabbit hole. But for today, I think I finally found the thread connecting everything that we've talked about: the goldfish, the Flynn effect, the reading scores, AI. None of them are really about intelligence. They're about practice. They're about what we choose to exercise and what we slowly allow to atrophy. And then I remembered a conversation I had not that long ago, and it bothered me for weeks because I had shared actual documented numbers with someone. Not an opinion, not a meme, not a screenshot from Facebook, but actual documented numbers. Receipts. And his only response was two words: all false. That was it. There was no counter argument, no sources, no, hey, where'd you find that? Just all false. And I just remember sitting there thinking, dude, you don't even know what you're disagreeing with yet. You're disagreeing with the very idea of being wrong, not the information, because the information never even got a chance. And I've been thinking about that conversation ever since, because he wasn't missing information. He had it. He just never wrestled with it. He never sat with it long enough to ask himself, what if I'm wrong? So, after all of that, the fish, James Flynn, the reading scores, AI, that conversation I couldn't get out of my head, I finally came back to the question we started with. Are we getting dumber? And I don't think that's actually the right question anymore. And honestly, I'm kind of relieved, because if the answer was simply, yup, well, that'd be a pretty hopeless episode. And I don't think that's what the evidence says. What I found was something a whole lot more complicated, and thankfully, a whole lot more hopeful. I don't think we're losing our intelligence. I think we're changing our relationship with it. Think about everything that I've talked about today. The goldfish story wasn't dangerous because someone made it up. It spread because people, myself included, never stopped to ask, is this actually true? The Flynn effect didn't tell us humanity suddenly got stupid. It told us something changed. The reading data didn't tell us kids can't learn. It reminded us that some of the habits that quietly train attention are happening less often. The AI research didn't tell us technology is evil. It reminded us that convenience and growth aren't always the same thing. Every single rabbit hole we followed today led to the exact same place: practice. What we practice is who we become. If we practice curiosity, we become more curious. If we practice patience, we become more patient. If we practice thinking, we become better thinkers. And if we stop practicing those things, they don't disappear overnight. They just get a little weaker, kind of like a muscle. The good news? Muscles can get stronger again. And I've been thinking about that a lot this week, because somewhere along the way, we started treating boredom like an emergency. Every single quiet moment gets filled. Standing in line, phone in hand. Waiting at the doctor's office, phone. Commercial break, phone. 5 minutes with your own thoughts, absolutely not, phone. And don't get me wrong, I get it. I'm not standing on some mountaintop pretending I'm above this. I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to you. I catch myself reaching for my phone all the time. Sometimes I don't even know why I picked it up. It's like my brain just goes, well, there might be dopamine in there. We're all practicing something. The question is, what are we practicing? Because I don't think that person I had that conversation with is some rare exception. And I don't think I'm some enlightened exception either. That guy responded to information by saying all false. I responded to information by realizing I'd accidentally slandered a goldfish. The difference was not our intelligence. The difference was curiosity. One response shuts the door, while the other opens it. And here's the beautiful part. Curiosity is a choice. It's not something you're born with. It's something you practice, which means it's something you can get back. So here's what I'd ask, not because I think I'm smarter than anyone. The fish has already humbled me, but because I think all of us, myself included, could probably use a few more reps. This week, read something. Not because reading makes you smarter, but because reading asks you to stay. Learn something just because you're curious. Sit with a question just a little longer before Googling the answer. Let yourself wrestle with an idea before you outsource it. Call someone you disagree with and ask questions instead of collecting ammunition. And maybe, just maybe, the next time something perfectly confirms everything you already believe, pause for just 5 seconds and ask one simple question. Where did this come from? Because if an innocent goldfish taught me anything this week, it's that being wrong isn't embarrassing. Refusing to find out is. Justice for Gerald. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me this week. If you enjoyed today's rabbit hole, I'd really appreciate it if you'd follow the show, leave a 5-star rating and review, and share this episode with someone who'd get a kick out of it. Independent podcasts grow because people tell other people. So if you know someone who loves asking, wait a minute, is that actually true? Send them this episode. And if you want to keep the conversation going, then come hang out with us in the lobby. We've got the Discord and the private Facebook group. That's where these rabbit holes keep going long after the microphones turn off. Huge shout out to my player 2 for listening to me spend an unreasonable amount of time defending a goldfish this week, and somehow never once questioning your life choices. As always, I've been Nate, your resident Average Joe. Stay gold, nerd bold, and I'll catch you on the next one. Oh hey, one last thing. Researchers think removing lead from gasoline and paint helped improve cognitive outcomes across generations, which is incredible because it means our environment really does shape how we think. And that raises a question I haven't been able to stop thinking about. If lead was one of yesterday's invisible cognitive hazards, then what's ours? You know, I have some theories. Producer Steve has strongly encouraged me to save those theories for another episode. Yeah, dude, I get it, for legal reasons. You know what? He's probably right. Anyways, I'll catch you next time.
Game over.